Good morning, everybody. I'm David Anderson, the program lead for the Healthy Landscapes program at FRI Research. And welcome to Wednesday webinars for the Healthy Landscapes program. I'm just going to give a couple of introductory remarks and we can get underway. Also on the line is Terry McHugh, who is the operations manager and the program lead for the Knowledge Network with FRI Research. And of course, our presenter, Raphael Chavardes, who is a PhD student at UBC under Dr. Laurie Daniels. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We are going to be recording the presentation, but not the question and answer afterwards. We'll make the presentation available to all of you at the start of the Q&A. Terry will post it, and hopefully everyone who wants it can download it. For questions, your microphones will be turned off for the whole time. It'll only be Terry, Raphael, and I who have a mic available. If you have questions, type them into the chat box, and when Raphael is finished, I will read them, I or Terry will read them to Raphael, and we will answer that way. And I think we're about ready to go here. Just another quick reminder that this is the second in our initial series of 4 talks, first Wednesday of every month, and then we'll probably be going every quarter after that. So hopefully you can join us for other webinars and pass the word around. And with that, I will turn off my microphone and we will get underway with Raphael. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will share with you this fire history reconstruction for Montane Forest of Jasper National Park. For those of you less familiar with southwestern Canada, Jasper National Park is located in the Canadian Cordillera and more specifically in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta. This photograph, taken in 1997, shows the predominance of closed canopy stands in Jasper's montane and subalpine forests. From this photograph alone, it appears that high-severity fires dominate in such a landscape. However, this paradigm requires investigation when we look at this earlier photograph taken in 1915. In the bottom photograph, we observed open and closed canopy forests interspersed with grasslands. What a remarkable change in the landscape over 82 years. To determine if the landscape is outside its historical range of variation, we must understand the mechanisms of change such that management can address the right problem. To do so, we ask the following ecosystem-specific questions. 1. How severe and frequent were historic fires in the Montane Forest of Jasper National Park? 2. How has fire history affected forest structure and composition? And 3. Why has the fire regime changed over the 20th century? This research was predominantly conducted in mid-elevation Montane Forest of Jasper National Park. The study area was 12 kilometers north of the town of Jasper on both sides of the Athabasca River. We sampled a network of 29 sites for tree size structure and species composition. At each site, we reconstructed historic fire frequency and severity by developing cross-dated fire scar records and high-resolution age structures. We collected 64 fire scar cross-sections as shown at the top of this slide. These included thick-barked Douglas-fir, but also thin-barked lodgepole pine. These fire scar cross-sections are evidence that low-severity surface fires burned at the base of these trees but did not kill them. The map shows the number of fire years found at each site using these fire records. To determine the years during which fires burned, we used a statistical technique known as cross-dating, where we match the pattern of wide and narrow annual growth rings. By doing this, we can place an exact calendar year to each ring formed and also an exact calendar year to each fire scar. We also collected 560 increment cores. At each site, we cored the 10 nearest canopy and 10 nearest subcanopy trees from site center. If only canopy trees were present, we only cored the 10 nearest canopy trees. Like the fire scar samples, we cross-dated cores to determine when trees within a site established. If most of the trees at a site established within a short window, these were considered a cohort of trees. A cohort of trees provided evidence that a more severe disturbance, in this case fire, burned at this site. Combined, the cross-dated annually resolved fire scars and high-resolution age-structure data allow detailed site-level reconstructions of fire history through time. Over the next set of slides, I will present graphs that show reconstructions of fire history through time over one to multiple sites. This graph presents the fire history and age structure for one site. The red triangles mark a fire year found using cross-dated fire scars. Each square symbolizes a tree establishing. Different shades represent different species. The squares were placed into 15-year age classes because establishment dates included two corrections, one coring above the ground and two missed piths. Total corrections were just below 15 years, hence the 15-year age classes. Veteran trees were those that survived fires. And the black triangle represents the starting year for a cohort's establishment. A cohort was defined when at least 1/4 of the trees established within a 30-year window. At this site, following the most recent fire, a cohort established. At 18 of 29 sites, fire scars and veteran trees combined with post-fire cohorts were legacies of past fires of mixed severity. At 11 sites, we found evidence of only high-severity fires, a single even-age cohort rarely coinciding with the fire scar. In the Montain forest of Jasper National Park, historical fires burned at a wide range of frequencies and severities at site and study area scales, providing strong evidence of a mixed-severity fire regime. The fire chart shows the fire record at each site from site 1 at the top to site 29 at the bottom. We found fire scars at 20 of 29 sites, most commonly on thin-barked lodgepole pine. Multiple fire scars on thick-barked Douglas-fir, but also on lodgepole pine, showed 2 to 5 surface fires burned through time at 11 sites. At these sites, fire-to-fire intervals were 11 to 165 years, but most were between 30 to 60 years. At all 29 sites, we found at least one cohort. Many sites burned in widespread fires in 1827, 1889, and 1905. These fires initiated post-fire cohorts at 17 sites, providing evidence of moderate to high severity fires 110 to 180 years ago. The presence of fire scars at 20 sites, at least one cohort at all sites, and variable fire frequencies provide strong evidence that the historical fire regime was of mixed severity. These findings contrast the traditional paradigm that high severity fires dominate in the Canadian Cordillera. There's another interesting thing about this graph. Since 1905, we found a lack of fire scars at all of the 29 sites. Simultaneous, long fire-free intervals at all sites during the 20th century are unprecedented in the 250-year fire scar record. This pair of graphs shows importance values of the canopy layer by coniferous species. Importance values were calculated from tree basal area and density. We found canopies were mixed in composition regardless of fire history. Lodgepole pine, hybrid spruce, and Douglas-fir established at the same time following low to high severity fires. What this implies is that for this area, we would not be able to differentiate the subtle nuances in fire histories from standard timber cruise inventories and remote sensing. Rather, we were able to distinguish between fire histories because of cross-dated high-resolution tree age data and annually dissolved fire scars. Traditional models of succession in which lodgepole pine precedes spruce oversimplify forest dynamics in Jasper and could mislead interpretations of disturbance history. In the Montane forests, lodgepole pine, hybrid spruce, and Douglas-fir established simultaneously after low to high severity fires. And forest canopies are mixed in composition, while the subcanopies are strongly dominated by shade-tolerant spruce, regardless of fire history. However, despite their size, the subcanopy spruce were similar in age as the canopy trees. They do not represent recent recruitment and stand infilling. Rather, species-specific growth rates and adaptations to shade resulted in size stratification among species and canopy layers. These trees have survived in absence of surface fires, but now provide ladder fuels, increased fire hazard, and decreased forest resistance to high severity fires, especially during droughts. In absence of fires over the 20th century, forest stands have developed similarly, resulting in a decrease in landscape diversity. So why has the fire regime changed over the 20th century? Building on a study conducted by FRI research in the 1990s, we cross-dated fire scars and tree ages from 172 sites. Here are the 29 sites embedded in those 172 sites. And here are the number of fires recorded at each site. In total, 45 sites showed evidence of surface fires. Cross-dating fire scars and tree ages sampled at 172 sites in the Montane and lower subalpine forests of Jasper yielded evidence of 18 fires between 1646 and 1915, shown on the graph as thick black vertical lines. Fire frequency was greatest from the 1880s to 1915, consistent with well-documented human use of fire by indigenous First Nation peoples, European peoples, and people of dual or complex ancestries. We found no fire scars after 1915, even though there were trees that could have recorded a fire had a fire burned. More specifically, 45 out of the 172 sites had fire-scarred trees susceptible to further scarring, and all sites had thin-barked trees. So we posed two hypotheses. One, climate was unsuitable to fire over the 20th century, or two, human impacts such as fire exclusion and suppression led to this absence of fire. This graph shows the pattern of wide and narrow ring widths from 1637 to 2011 for a Douglas-fir tree ring chronology from Jasper. To determine if the chronology was a suitable proxy of drought, we conducted a climate growth correlation analysis between the chronology and a heat moisture index combining precipitation and maximum temperature. Higher indices of heat moisture correspond to dry conditions. The bottom graph shows on the horizontal axis the month and season relative to ring formation, while the vertical axis shows the strength of the relationship. We found significant negative relationships between higher heat moisture indices and tree growth during the previous and current growing seasons, indicating the chronology was a suitable proxy of drought. Note that the black dots on the graph show statistically significant results. This graph here shows the mean index value of the chronology during fire years and the 3 preceding years. The black lines show the 95 to 99.9% confidence intervals generated from 1,000 Monte Carlo simulations. The red dashed line shows the mean index value during the 18 fire years. We found that fire years were statistically associated with negative indices corresponding to narrow rings and hence drier conditions. This indicated that fires were more likely to burn during droughts. On this graph, the red dots symbolize the 18 fire years, and the red dashed line shows the mean index value during the fire years. The black dots represent all years that had values below that mean index value. We were conservative in only considering those years as drought years. Since 1915, we found a lack of fire scars, even though multiple years were suitable to fire over the 20th century. And modern fire records agree with the lack of fire scars. Based on historical records, we found the park was created in 1907. In 1910, local families were displaced, removing fire as a land and resource management tool, and fire protection and suppression were implemented in 1913. We conclude that human impacts exceeded the effects of climate variation, and the change to the fire regime was primarily due to fire exclusion and suppression. In the absence of fires of a range of severities during the 20th century, individual stands developed similarly, decreasing landscape diversity in the Montane forests of Jasper National Park. To summarize, this research provides evidence that historically a mixed severity fire regime dominated in the Montane forests of Jasper National Park. It was the use of cross-dated annually resolved fire scars and the high-resolution age structures which allow detailed site-level reconstructions differentiating mixed versus high-severity fire histories through time. And the lack of fires of the 20th century changed forest composition and structure, as well as increased fire hazards. Human impacts superseded climate as the dominant driver of 20th century fire. And this change to the fire regime has led to a homogenization of the landscape, a reduction of its resilience towards lower severity fires, and an increase in susceptibility towards high severity fires. Our findings provide strong support for modern fire policies, allowing managed wildfires and the use of thinning and prescribed burning to restore ecosystems and mitigate fuel hazards. Should you require more details on the findings presented, you may look through these two articles. And I thank you kindly for your interest and your attention.